Hey, this is David Owen.
And this is Marian Cowagowan.
And this is You Show Me Yours, a podcast where a married couple talks about the movies and television that they loved before the first date.
Except for the month of April, when we talk about movies that we loved after the first date. We met in April. And so this month we look at more, modern movies, because 2003 was a really long time ago. And this week, because it's the fifth week in April and we were running out of ideas, we watched a movie that neither of us had seen. So we're not true to the spirit of the podcast at all, but, it happens. And so today we made ourselves watch Oppenheimer.
Yes. Oppenheimer, the 2023 Chris Nolan. Joe, I call him Chris. You're
tight like that. Yeah.
We're good like that.
Yeah.
Christopher's just so long to write out.
Yes.
We have limited space on our whiteboard.
Right. We started Barbenheimer last year, I think, after the first 8 months, and now we are completing it.
Yes. But this, if you haven't seen it, I'm not going to attempt to tell you what it is, other than to say
it's a biopic.
It's a biopic of J. Robert Oppenheimer. It is 3 hours long, and it's pretty good. And it tells the story of the Manhattan Project and Oppenheimer's ouster from the public eye and government in the 50s.
Yeah, I would say it's less about the atomic bomb than I thought it would be, and more about just the anti-communism forces of the 50s.
Yeah, I mean, it's highlighting that stuff, sure, and it's also just about how the government works, right?
Yeah,
it's just people have their usefulness, then they don't have their usefulness, and then they become. Oppenheimer was afforded a lot of weight behind what he said, but because he became famous for for leading the Manhattan Project, and then he said some things that certain people didn't like. Specifically, he was against the development of the hydrogen bomb, or he wasn't in favor of it. Let's say for various reasons, and the United States government had more or less decided that it wanted to develop the hydrogen bomb. The hydrogen bomb just being a more destructive, faster, more efficient is not the word. Different way to make a fission bomb, and there's a scene during the development of the atomic bomb where one particular physicist, I forget his name because there's like 1,000 physicists,
too many,
and faces in this movie, proposes this, and it's largely theoretical. He doesn't have a lot, but the science seems solid. And he is kind of dismissed. He wants to leave the project, but is allowed to just sort of continue to develop the hydrogen bomb in the margins while they develop the atom bomb, the uranium and plutonium based bombs that would be dropped on Japan. And he basically, Oppenheimer runs afoul of forces that want to build a giant nuclear arsenal as quickly as possible, because it took a significant amount of time to make the two bombs that were dropped. There's a lot to talk about with this movie. I think we'll just hit the stuff that sort of feels good for us.
Yeah, and we should have position statements here. I'm not a Christopher Nolan stan, whereas you are, or at least you are more than I am.
Oh, for sure. No,
I feel
for
like that affects our points of view.
Yeah, I think Christopher Nolan is a modern day Stanley Kubrick. Like, I think he has a breadth of work that spans several different subject matters. He has a sensibility about his filmmaking. Yeah, there's I think he might be the best modern director working today.
Okay. And I don't have strong feelings either way. I haven't seen enough of his movies to have an opinion, but don't.
And I say that from a standpoint of the stories that he tells, the stories that he chooses to tell, the fact that he boldly, much like Stanley Kubrick did, he boldly tells science fiction stories in mainstream movies, big budget mainstream movies, and doesn't shy away from getting highly technical about it. I think
Mhm.
he was the perfect choice to make a movie like this. And I've seen pretty much his whole filmography except for Dunkirk, which I haven't seen for some reason. Um, yeah. So yeah, that's a good point. Um, so and this movie was very like Nolan catnip for someone like me. Like,
Mhm.
have you seen Memento? Memento.
No. I know the gist of it, but I haven't seen it.
Um, so this movie is very similar to Memento in the way that it's told. Memento famously is about a man who cannot retain um, short-term memories,
Mhm.
and the movie starts in the middle and basically reaches what would be the end of a linear movie, and then
Mhm.
has a conclusion beyond that kind of un, pulls the veil off of the things that were. So, and this movie similarly sort of starts in uh, a random place a seemingly random place in his life. It tells his story, his early life, his late life, his middle life. It's going back and forth. It uses various techniques to do that. Everything that's set in the furthest time, meaning like 1959 or something, is all in black and white.
Mhm.
And then various cues are used. Like if you see Oppenheimer in his trademark hat, it's probably during the Manhattan Project. If you see him without the hat, he's probably in his earlier years. If you see him with gray
Mm.
hair,
Mhm.
we're obviously past the Manhattan Project.
Yeah.
That
But
sort of stuff. So it uses it asks a lot of the viewer to keep track of this non-linear storytelling.
yes, and I was a little confused at first, and then basically I realized so that yeah, the black and white is one storyline and the
Yeah,
color is another. There's a little bit of flash forward, flashback in the color
yeah,
storyline, not very much. So they're basically yeah, two timelines, and the black and white is more the Robert Downey Jr.
yeah.
storyline.
The Lewis Strauss
Yeah,
storyline, who was, I guess, the first cabinet level uh,
cabinet appointee to
appointee
be binged
rejected
for
by the Senate.
for a very long time. Yeah.
Yeah, the first modern um, cabinet. Yeah, so there's that story, which is essentially that story also weaves within
Hmm.
the story of Oppenheimer's life and a little bit into the Manhattan Project. Though Strauss is not privy to like the he's not part of the Manhattan Project. He's probably in the government at that point, privy to something, or he's in academia or whatever. Yeah, so it is. It's a big movie with a lot of story. It won like 7 Oscars.
Hmm.
I would say deservedly so.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean it's a kind of a beast of a movie,
yeah,
which you would expect because it's based on a biography, which is there's a lot of life in this one man, so there's
yeah.
a lot in the biography, a lot in the movie. It's yeah, I can't imagine what the process of coming up with a script
Oh
was for
yeah,
this.
yeah.
That's
And that's why I say Nolan, I think, is the perfect guy because he does write his own movies often with his brother. And he was responsible for Memento, and
hmm
again another movie that had a lot of threads to keep track of and found various ways to do it. Um, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. Why don't you talk for a minute?
uh yeah.
Pick something.
Uh, I mean, my first thought about this is there's just too many people, and
A lot of people.
thank God for recognizable character actors because
Yes.
I was able to go, okay, wait, his brother is the guy that was in You that season that she slept with. Okay, that I know who that guy is now.
Yeah.
Okay, this is
Yeah.
I
This
can't.
movie benefits from. Yeah, it's yeah, the guy that played what's his name, Rabbi. The
Yeah,
yeah, the
yeah, he's who did I think it was at first? Oh, I thought it was Alfred Molina, but
yeah.
it's not. It's the guy that I always think of as Rob Morrow's younger brother. What did they do together? Anyway,
I
it
don't
doesn't matter.
remember. Yeah.
David Krumholtz
Yeah.
is his
Yeah.
name. Yeah. So if you don't recognize any of these character actors, you're going to be very confused. And I kind of, and I kind of thought this would have benefited from something that they do in a lot of kind of ripped from real life movies, where they have these like slight freeze frames when a character comes in for the first time and they say who they are and what the, you know,
Yeah.
just for keeping track of everybody. I'm sure that is some directors love that, some hate it.
Yeah.
And some storytelling you can do without it, et cetera, et cetera. But I found myself confused as to who was who. So
Yeah,
that would
like
help.
I think it's maybe a little. I think Nolan would think of it maybe as a little beneath him.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Like a freeze frame, and then Killian Murphy goes, "That's Niels Bohr."
Yeah.
A famous physicist who figured out the structure of the atom.
Yeah.
Like him or you've heard his name. That's Heisenberg, famous for his uncertainty
Right.
principle. Like that kind of stuff.
Fun fact about him, he
Yeah.
can
Heck of a card player.
yeah, he really likes cherry tomatoes, but not the grape ones.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. No, I see that, but it's a lot.
It is. And I think that they are, they don't expect you to keep up with these people. I think a lot of these are just here to emphasize how broad this race to develop an atomic bomb was, how many names that were involved. Technically speaking, Einstein did some work on this, like in the most slightest sense. And a lot of that, having Niels Bohr and Heisenberg and all these other Bainbridge and these other guys, like these are names that when you study physics, them, and and then saying like, hey, these guys like worked on the atomic bomb and shit, and like some of them were working for Germany.
Yeah, it's a little fascinating. Like, I haven't taken a science class in going on 30 years, and that is just fine with me. I'm not a huge science person, but I remember Heisenberg, and I remember Niels Bohr, and it was sort of interesting to see. I only know them in theoretical terms, and if you had asked me what time in history Heisenberg lived, I could not have told you. So it's interesting to see these things that I think of as, or these people that I think of as only dry academic concepts being in quote real life here. So that's interesting.
That stuff's always cool, and it does a great job of, I think one thing that people don't often have a good grasp on, like all the time you see people, I see this on social media, or you just see people in general going like, hey, did you know like Pablo Picasso was alive at the same time as like
history goes both ways.
There are people that think Pablo Picasso and Michelangelo were contemporaries. Like they just think all of the art happened
back then.
Yeah, in the years in the early, with 3 digits and with
that was before they invented color. So
so it is. This movie is great for that, for just being able to say like Oppenheimer, who spearheaded the project that made the atomic bomb in the 40s, was friends with Einstein. And the funny thing, that the really great thing that they actually do, Einstein, I think, is probably the greatest physicist in history, because his discovery has reverberations. His relativity has reverberations that are still being felt today. And though it's not complete, the thing about relativity is effectively a replacement for Newtonian gravity. Newtonian gravity says objects have mass, and that's why they attract. Relativity says, no. Objects have mass, and they depress space-time. And that curvature of space-time gravity is a geometric property of that curvature of space-time. It's not that mass attracts mass. It's that we're all on a sheet that's pulled taut. And if you put a heavy ball in the middle, all of the rest of the balls you place on there will roll towards that ball. And if those balls then don't hit that big ball and instead they pass it, they will continue to go around it, and they will be constantly pulled towards it, pulled away from it by different forces, by different other things that are also depressing space-time. And that has been, he made predictions that we're only just proving now. In 1915, he predicted things like gravitational waves. And there's a project called LIGO that only recently, in like 2018 or something, detected actual gravitational waves. Basically he theorized that if relativity is true, then you should be able to measure that bending of space-time in the form of a gravitational wave. And it was a theory, and only just recently have we proven it true. And so it reverberates through history. And now we're at the point where we have gotten, the thing about relativity is that it breaks down at the quantum level. It really breaks down below the planetary level, but that's not what this podcast is for. And so now we're working on a theory of quantum gravity. So like all the physicists today they're just trying to finish what Einstein started. They're like, okay, Einstein got it right up until the subplanetary level. Like, the bending of space-time is not the reason that we are still attracted to the planet Earth. There's something else to gravity that we haven't figured out yet. And the way that this movie, I say all that to say, the way that this movie shows Einstein in 1942 or whatever as a fossil, as a relic of a bygone time when he made a discovery that is still reverberating in physics today. But in even 30 years after 25 years after his discovery, Oppenheimer is basically saying, like, we've passed Einstein. We're out of that. And the more that they discovered, the more that they realized there was still more gas left in the tank of general and special relativity. So that was one of the interesting things that I thought that this movie did, is that it showed you people who were still alive, who were alive and working in physics during Einstein's twilight years, basically, that they were like, Einstein, Schmeinstein.
Yeah.
Like, we are on the verge of something new and something, beyond. And that was one of the most interesting things that I think that this movie revealed. It would almost be like, finding out that, Picasso died poor or whatever.
Yeah.
With never seeing his fame or whatever, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Just an interesting sort of correction to history, because
Right.
you never really get that. You don't often get that part of the story. Like, 5 years later, what did people think about George Washington after he left the presidency? What was there to that? Like, where's the story, the after story? Same, and I think there's a lot of traction there for a lot of good storytelling. And this is just a throwaway part of this movie, but it was one of the parts of the movie that really stuck with me, like, getting to see that.
Yeah. The idea that geniuses are never fully appreciated in their own time.
Yeah. And
someone a generation or two later has to come back and go, oh my God.
Yeah. Like,
they totally missed this part.
You don't understand how revolutionary this was. Yeah. So there's a lot of physicists in this movie.
Yes.
And it is, it's hard to keep up with, and it's not something I think you're intended to keep up with.
No, you just have to kind of let it flow past you. It's, like there's a lot of smart people here. That's really, a lot of minds went into this. Which honestly, I think we like to think that one person, maybe two, is behind fill in the blank amazing technological feat, but everything takes dozens, hundreds of people doing careful work in a back room somewhere, like checking the math and doing all this stuff, and you will never know their names. But if any one of them had not been there, history goes very differently. And that's true for the the atom bomb, for the space shuttle, for the, I don't know, the automobile, for the internet, for everything. So even if you don't learn anyone's name, it's nice to see that they're all there, they're represented somehow.
Oh yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, and sometimes and seeing the ways that it all happens, and Teller was the H bomb guy, and seeing how he was kind of, like if you don't know, like pretty much all of our nuclear arsenal these days are hydrogen bombs. Like they've been hydrogen bombs since the first two. Like the term atomic bomb is like, or nuclear bomb, like certainly atomic bomb. You know, it's not that there's not plutonium; it's that there's not all plutonium like there were in those first two bombs. Yeah, and seeing that sort of stuff, and being like, oh, this guy's like understanding this guy has a whole, like there's a whole movie to be made about this guy. Heisenberg and Teller and Lawrence and these guys, they're like, no, some of these guys are like Nobel Prize winning people in their field that did a lot more than just participate in this Oppenheimer's life.
Yes, that was like the sidebar to their life story.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about too many things in a row. I feel like I'm bloviating. Do you want a monologue about either of the two things that you put up on the?
Yes. Yeah, I unsurprisingly, I focused for a bit on the female characters. Not that there are many here, but Kitty Oppenheimer was a terrible person. What the hell?
How do you mean?
Like, well, first of all, because after we watched this, I went and read a little bit of about some of these people, and she got pregnant on purpose to trap Oppenheimer, which is
cool.
Gross, particularly when she was married to somebody at the time.
Yeah.
And then
they were both married.
No, right? he wasn't. He was involved with Jean, sort of, but not. They weren't married.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's gross. And I had a little bit of sympathy for her when Oppenheimer comes home and the baby is crying in the back room, and Oppenheimer's like, "Are you going to go to him?" to Kitty, and she's like, "I've been going to him all day," which, let me tell you, I felt in my bones, because sometimes the baby just will not settle and there's nothing you can do, and you just have to be like, you know what, kid, you're on your own for a minute. I'm going to go have a moment to myself.
Yeah, cry it out.
Yes. Well, or not even that, but just like, I don't know what's bugging you, but it can bug you while I'm here, venting a little bit so that I don't throttle you and throw you out the window. Like, that's impossible. And then, of course, it's real fun when your husband is like, well, why aren't you? Maybe he needs something. You're like, no, he doesn't.
Yeah.
He's fed, he's dry, there's no diaper, but nothing. Like, there's nothing I can do, So, like, I felt for her right then. Mm-hmm. And then a couple scenes later, the baby's down to sleep, and she's like, okay, the brat's taken care of. And I was just like, oh, this is a brittle lady. I do not like her. Like, I am fine with the, postpartum difficult time. Like, I feel that, but like, she's just, and she doesn't seem to like her children. She doesn't seem to like anybody. And then she's doing this kind of like a Lady Macbeth thing when Oppenheimer is in these hearings, and it's basically, technically it's about whether his security clearance is going to be renewed, but it's basically pillorying him for not being, not being enough of whatever. I don't know.
This is the point where they want him out of they want his influence out of the picture.
Yeah. So what's going on is way more important than it actually looks. And she's, doing this, you've got to fight. You've got to, I'm just like, okay. I don't like you at all.
So Kitty's character is an ambitious woman who is stuck in a time where female ambition is not really allowed in the same way that it would be today. I think she is ruthless. I think she's bitter because she is already a botanist when they meet, and she essentially becomes Oppenheimer's wife and a stay-at-home mom. And I think she's a woman with ambition, and the child was a tactic.
Mm-hmm.
I think she is a ruthless woman with ambition, working within the confines of a system that is not hospitable to her as a woman. And so I think it's that, and I mean, she is loyal despite all of his disloyalty.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think she just understands that she needs a man to attach herself to, and she moves from one successful man to a more successful man. I think
Mm-hmm.
she's a ruthless character that is a product of the system that has kind of made her into what she is.
Well, possibly. And I mean, yes, obviously, in the 30s and 40s, women were not given the same respect, opportunity, etc. So, yes. But we don't see any of that. We
Well, I think we
just
see some of that. I think we see hints of
eh,
that. I mean, I think
eh.
the fact that she essentially moves from one husband to another, she perceives Oppenheimer as more valuable. And then like you're talking about, the scene where she's essentially trying she's trying to preserve their capital that they have by him having, his security clearance, therefore having, a trusted role within the government, as an advisor. She's trying to keep her place, essentially. I don't know. I mean, I don't disagree that with what you're saying. I just see her motivations differently, perhaps, than you. And I can also understand that if she did have the kid as a means of entrapment, why she would resent it when she
Well,
was left to take care of it.
yes, but and then I just yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, and I think it's because I went from a lot of sympathy for her right there in that scene, and then just downhill. So
Yeah.
And it's certainly I've had uncharitable thoughts about my own kid when he was being very high needs, and
Yeah.
you probably have too. And
Sure.
I think that women are judged more harshly for having those thoughts than men are. So but the movie has her say it doesn't have Oppenheimer say it. So ugh.
Yeah, it's possible that he doesn't have the same resentment.
That's true, because he doesn't need to do any
Right,
of the
because
work.
he doesn't. Right, because he's not involved.
Yeah, it doesn't see him. We don't see him being much of a father, a good father or a bad father. I
No,
don't
no.
think he's not
Yeah,
really
it's
involved with the kids.
it's almost like the question is avoided. We know that they bring their families to the Los Alamos base, and he understands that scientists will be more productive with their families. He also is responsible, at least in part, for populating the camp's staff with the wives, giving them ways to be productive and to contribute.
Mm-hmm. But it was not for any love of women or wanting them to have opportunities. It was just, there's fewer people and less of a security risk.
Well,
Which,
a little bit of that, but yeah, I mean, but someone recaps it. I don't know if it's General Leslie or who, as this sort of more in a more pragmatic way of just being like, oh yeah, it makes perfect sense. They already have security clearance because they're already here on the base.
mm-hmm.
It's less people to include in on the project. It makes perfect sense. I don't know that that's his motivation 100%. But he understands that scientists work better, and there is a version of the story where there's more of like if you've ever seen like the guy on Community, Abed, I think is his name,
Mm-hmm.
or Sheldon Cooper, like a very smart person who has some of those autistic tendencies, who is just like doing something that seems nice, but is actually just for his, like, there's a storyline in Community where Abed is tracking all the women's cycles, and he has figured out the things that lessen their mood swings, and has almost like Pavlovianly trained them to like when he knows that, so he'll give like one girl a candy, and he knows that calms her down or whatever.
Oh boy.
And of course, like his whole deal is that he's on the spectrum, and
mm-hmm.
they all are very offended by this, and he doesn't understand why. He's like, well, I just saw a pattern and I started tracking it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a version of this story where it's the same kind of thing with Oppenheimer, of just like, it made totally practical sense to do this. I wasn't doing this for any, but they don't get into that. And that would be the interesting thing of like, yeah, was his motivation more of just that clinical sort of side of genius of just like, well, this was the optimal solution, or was it like, oh, I work better because I have my family here. These guys will work better if their family's around.
Yeah. Well, Yeah, I suspect it was, oh, these guys will want their wives there. Not that he wanted his wife there, but I do think it was more clinical because, and you know, one of the arcs that we see is he goes from treating, so he's a theoretical physicist
Yes.
at the his training is. And when they start thinking about the atom bomb, it feels really more like an exercise of like, could we do this?
Oh, 100%.
And, you know, as the famed Dr. Ian Malcolm told us, sometimes you think so much about whether you can do something, you don't think about whether you should.
Mm-hmm.
And when they finally test the bomb and it works and he sees not the destruction so much, but he can imagine the destruction because you see the absolute ferocity of this bomb.
Mm-hmm.
Then he realizes, oh my God, this is real. This is going to kill people and demolish a city and this and that. So I think that that seems to be what changed his point of view on the whole thing. But he went from strictly theoretical, oh, well, people work better with their families there and less security clearance, blah, 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 and not really thinking about the actual people involved, which seems to be more of the, oh, these women are smart and they're scientists too,
Sure.
and we should give them jobs.
Yeah, but I don't think the movie gives us enough data. Maybe the book does to know what his actual motivation was, though. But I can see what you're saying. I can see what you're saying for sure.
Yeah.
While we're talking about the bomb, we might as well talk about the implications of the bomb. And yeah, I do think Oppenheimer starts out very theoretical, and it is, and it's almost sold to him as a you know, we're going to do this once and it's going to be done and we're not going to worry about it, and it's a deterrent and it's going to end the war, and we've got to beat, because originally they start this with Germany still in the war, we've got to beat Germany to it, because whether happenstance or not, a lot of these famous physicist guys are German, who have dealt, you know, in the early days of atomic theory, Niels Bohr and
I think
Teller.
They're not German, but they're in countries that Germany
Certainly.
occupied, so they're being sucked in.
Yeah,
which
they
is
either are
awful.
explicitly German or they are in countries that have been occupied.
Sure.
And they talk about one of them.
That was
is it
Niels Bohr?
Is it Bohr's? Yeah, that they get out, and Oppenheimer thinks he's going to join the project, and he's like, no, I'm not here. Yeah. The always good for a theatrical performance, Kenneth Branagh comes in and says, no, I'm not here.
Insert European accent here.
Right. Yeah. Insert Kenneth Branagh doing a pretty good European accent.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do think it starts out theoretical. You're absolutely right. And then as they work on it, Lawrence, played by Josh Hartnett, is instrumental in the realization of these theories. He is at, is it Princeton? With Oppenheimer, I can't remember, but he is at.
It's Berkeley and
is it Berkeley
and UCLA? I think.
Yeah, with Oppenheimer, and essentially they become sort of fast friends, and because Lawrence is capable of actualizing the things that Oppenheimer can only imagine, and as they get closer to that point. I think it does become the gravity of it becomes more apparent to him, because it is all. I think Nolan does a good job of just sort of showing how it is all sort of a game until it's not. When they're tracking the amount of material that they have these glass bowls that are approximately the size of the payloads in the two different bombs, and they're putting marbles in there until it's full, which is just feels like a game.
Yeah, that was a really striking visual. It's kind of like when you track, how do we have enough money to save the barn and put a gazebo in the town square, is like that.
Yeah,
kind
and
of
you've
thing.
got the thermometer that you're
exactly.
painting the colors on.
Yeah,
and it's sort of it's not a real sort of thing. Like it's just marbles in a jar. I think that's a really interesting way to represent that.
Yeah. I thought there was an interesting foreshadowing, and I cannot remember now the context in which this came up, but Oppenheimer makes some reference to Alfred Nobel inventing dynamite.
Yes.
And then he's like, and then now we have the Nobel Prize. And I was like, you know why we have the Nobel Prize? Because he was filled
He
with
was
regret
right. He
for
hated it. Yeah.
all the damage he
Yeah.
had done, you know.
I
And
think,
and I don't think I think that's better if it's not made explicit. If you just know, but you're like, oh, I see the arc you're going to
yeah.
take.
And
Okay,
I don't remember the context, but it's something like, I don't know if they give a Nobel Prize for making a bomb. And he's like,
that's it. Yeah,
yeah, Alfred Nobel actually invented dynamite.
yeah,
Yeah. But it is right with the full context of understanding what the reason the Nobel Prize
yes.
exists. It is for,
It's his
peaceful.
it's his repenting and
Yeah.
his trying to make up for what he did. That's why there's a peace
A
prize
peace prize, right?
specifically.
That's why there's a Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think this movie does a great job of sort of driving home so this is one of those sort of filmmaky sort of things. Like, again, I've told the story many times that I was at some point an aspiring filmmaker, in so much as I studied film in my spare time as a hobby. I studied cinematography, again, not professional, or not in any courses, or under the tutelage of any experts. But I took a lot of notes on it. I watched a lot of the classic movies. And I think I don't want to get too deep into it, but I think the way that the transition of Oppenheimer, when the bomb comes into his life early on, when he imagines everything is these fields. It almost looks like mist that light has been shown onto, different colored lights.
Mm-hmm.
And this is him sort of imagining the unseen world of the atom, and the micro world of the things that he's theorizing about. And it's all very it has a sort of a sweeping motion to it, and it all sways, and it's lit very softly, and he's essentially imagining the world that he's theorizing, and
Mm-hmm.
it's calm. And by the time you get to the bomb, every time you get a flash of what's in his head, it's violent, and it's
Yeah.
fireballs, and
Yeah.
it's
The skin peeling off
skin
people's
peeling,
faces.
and it's all that. And it's a great transition of the way that they set up the way that he used to view physics as this purely theoretical thing, where he was just imagining the universe of atoms that exist below the surface that
Mm-hmm.
humans can see, and it's elegant and it's beautiful, and then it's harsh and it's destructive and it's fire,
And this is the violence that,
yeah.
yeah. It strikes me, he never says this, and I don't know if this was part of anyone's thought process, but at one point, was the bomb viewed as like a clean way of of enacting warfare? Like, you don't have to be there and bayonet or shoot somebody. It's all from a distance, which strikes me as similar to the way that we now use drones.
Yes, for sure.
So someone is on the other side of the world and operating stuff. And I think you can think, oh, that's clean. There's no risk to our troops. But I think that has shown to be very traumatic for the people who are doing it, because of this dissonance of, I'm not risking anything. This guy doesn't know that this bomb is coming, and yet I can zero in on him and kill him right in front of his children. And that's awful. So it's this kind of, we keep looking for these ways that war can be handled bloodlessly and without any damage, and it's just not possible.
Yeah. And you can even see Oppenheimer, literally making that case during the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he says multiple times, we just make the thing. We don't get to choose. And he does, despite saying that, I think he does feel some level of entitlement to at least being in the loop. Because they do show that basically him and his team don't know the bomb's been dropped. They don't know the target.
Yeah.
Though he is consulted on the target, he doesn't know the actual target until the rest of the world knows. Like, nobody calls him in advance and says, "Hey, we're dropping the bomb today."
They're listening to the radio, same as everybody else.
But he does say a few times of, like, we just make this weapon and we don't know how it's going to be used. And that, I think, is a way, like you were just saying, of insulating himself from the responsibility. And I think that once it's actually used, he comes to that realization that he does bear some level of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And you think, on some level, he spends the rest of his life trying to avoid more of that, because his opposition to the hydrogen bomb is essentially, at that time, the Soviets don't know how to make a hydrogen bomb. And you often find this with people who don't understand, like, they think that a scientific breakthrough, that you can own it. But the
Mm-hmm.
moment that whether they have a spy or not, and they find out that they did have a longtime spy in Los Alamos, whether you have one or not, that sort of stuff isn't containable. If
Yeah.
you figure out how to split the atom, you figure out how to enrich uranium,
Someone else is going to figure it out too. Yeah.
someone else will figure it out. And Oppenheimer knows this. He knows that at this point the Soviets have no idea what a hydrogen bomb is. They haven't thought of it yet. Teller is essentially the only person to have conceived of this idea, to increase the payload to make a mega bomb, beyond an atomic bomb. And he knows that when they make a bunch of hydrogen bombs, they will tell the Soviets that they've made them, and the Soviets will then go to their physicists and say, what is this and how does it work? And they will start looking in that direction, and then it'll be an arms race. And it turns out he was right. That is what happened as the U.S. Unveiled hydrogen bombs and the ability to make a lot of them quickly with a lot less nuclear material. The Soviets figured out how to make, whether it was because of the spies in Los Alamos or whether it was some other way, they figured it out, and they inevitably will. Science is not something you can contain.
Mm-hmm.
If one person makes the discovery, it's gonna be made by someone else. You can't keep it secret.
Yeah.
And I think he understands that, and he fights against the hydrogen bomb, and he's fighting for some sort of nuclear non-proliferation.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what gets him into the stuff with Strauss.
Yeah. Well, two things. One, I think just because of, we were in sort of a pro-nuclear age and McCarthy, and we were scared of communists and everything. And it turned into, if you're not all in for building a nuclear arsenal, then clearly you're a communist, a Soviet communist. They make the distinction between academic communism and Soviet communism, which I thought was an interesting distinction that I had never really thought about before. I think that's useful because I think there are a lot of people who are like, well, this is great in theory, not the way they're doing it, but this concept is pretty good. But I think, urging any degree of, we don't have to go whole hog on this, got you tagged as a communist sympathizer, which is bonkers. But it's it's sort of a bad faith rhetorical device that you still see. Like, I don't think that we should be building H-bombs. Oh, you want the Russians to nuke us, don't you? Like, that is not at all. That is not at all what I said.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I think it's funny though, this whole thing with they make a big deal about the pronunciation. It's Strauss, right? Not Strauss.
Yeah.
This seemingly started because he got his feelings hurt.
Yeah, and that is the whole deal.
Like, it's his ego was damaged. He is
a narcissist, right? And that's that he is perfectly depicted as a narcissist, right? That everything is about him.
Yeah.
There is a Strauss, whatever. Thinks that he is going to have this great honor of introducing Einstein to Oppenheimer, or Oppenheimer to Einstein, only to find out that they are acquainted. And Oppenheimer goes out and talks to Einstein, and you don't know what they say initially. And when Einstein walks off and Strauss walks in, Einstein is very contemplative, turns out.
Yeah, and
but
doesn't
Strauss
greet
thinks
him
he's
warmly
ignoring
enough.
him. He thinks that Oppenheimer's turned him against him.
Because clearly that's the only thing they could have been talking about was me.
Was him.
Yeah. And then there's the part, Oppenheimer is testifying in front of Congress. I'm not sure if that was before or after. And he belittles some idea that Strauss had.
Yeah.
And Strauss just sits there and seethes and, and like, never mind whatever else Oppenheimer did. You insulted me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And everyone else is laughing at me. That's all they heard. And, and just like, oh, dude.
Yeah. Oppenheimer is, I believe, advocating for the giving or trading enriched materials to our allies so that they can effectively develop nuclear fusion and fission. I can never keep it straight. For power generation. Mm-hmm. And Strauss's contention is that is basically giving them the formula to a nuclear bomb, and Oppenheimer eviscerates that argument, by basically saying, giving someone flour is not giving them the recipe to make bread, that sort of thing. Yeah, yeah. And so he earns an enemy, and as a narcissist, um, Strauss keeps him like close, and is always trying to make it look like he's helping him out, and the whole time
Whew.
he's given the bad guys, as we'll call them, because there's a handful of
There's a
them.
lot of them, yeah.
Casey Affleck and David, what's his name?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. That guy that you
Yeah,
like.
yeah,
Yeah,
are
yeah, yeah.
are plotting against him, and all these things. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, there's a as I have this realization probably about once or twice a year, I could not be in politics because I am too, wide-eyed and earnest.
yeah.
I couldn't do this behind the scenes stuff of make them think that you're their friend and you're actually plotting against them and blah, blah, blah. Like, no, no, no. I would just be like, please do this. That's what I want you to do. Okay. Thank you. I owe you a favor. Okay, bye. Like, I can't fake anything. I can't play games. I can't do any of that stuff. And that movies and TV always make it look like that's all that politics is. And
Yeah.
it's probably not entirely wrong.
Yeah, for sure. There's one thing we brought up. We were talking before about, you said, who's Lawrence? And I said, Josh Hartnett.
Yeah.
And what did you say?
Yeah. I had a hard time taking that character seriously because Josh Hartnett, even though he's our age, right? So late 40s, he still looks like a teenager. Kind of like he's
I disagree.
He's a little bit paler and, not quite as, perky as he was, but he looks youthful.
Perhaps.
I cannot take him seriously as a scientist.
So I think he was perfectly cast in this because he looks like a whole lot of man in this. Like he is, because if you know Josh Hartnett, he was this skinny kid with the floofed up hair in all these teen movies in the 90s. And here he is filled out, broad-chested. He's filling out his suits, his 30s and 40s suits and uniforms. His hair is period, and he's got the glasses, and and he's just it is. So I have actually been watching and paying attention to his career because he's quietly had a really unique career. He was in that Showtime show about Draculas and vampires and all this.
Okay.
A few years ago, Penny Dreadful. Just did great in that. And he has quietly been having this career resurgence over the last 10 or 15 years. And he's been pushing back against that. You're just a teen, guy in a movie. I thought he was perfectly cast here. Okay. So it's just interesting to see the difference in how we perceive him because I'm aware of his more modern work.
Sure. Well, I will give you, yes, he looks taller and broader and, all that stuff. But I see his face and I'm like, that's...
Yeah. I see him and I go, oh, yes. Hello, grown adult man.
That's Josh Hartnett from the famous adaptation of Othello. Like, yes. I just see teen heartthrob.
Yeah, so. Yeah. And like I said, I see 30 Days of Night. I see Penny Dreadful. I see his more recent stuff.
Okay.
Versus still seeing him as the teen. So
and I think he comes across very mild.
Yeah, I think he has I think the personality is perfectly cast here. I think, Lawrence is a sort of enabler and he's not, he's rarely in conflict with Oppenheimer. Mm-hmm. And he's just sort of, because he's the practical part of this, he plays that very well. He has a great, demeanor for that. We've talked about already. There's a ton of people in this: Kenneth Branagh, Casey Affleck, Rami Malek, Josh Hartnett, Florence Pugh, just a bunch of people, and that really helps keep people separate. But I did want to cue you up with Florence Pugh for your Jean monologue here.
Yeah, I just. This is where I think the movie suffers because there's so much jammed in here. And I think there are characters that appear to be an important part of Oppenheimer's life, but we get these snippets and I don't think they're given enough time. I mean, like, this is not, a romantic story and people are in his life for these brief periods of time. And you can't devote the whole thing to them, but Florence Pugh plays Jean Tatlock, who is whatever. She's part of the Berkeley community. She's an academic somehow. I forget what she's doing. Psychology, I think. And meet at a party and they instantly start sleeping together.
Yeah.
A very weird, like, it didn't look like either of them was having fun.
I don't know.
Like,
I mean,
as sex scenes go, that was really just kind of dry and dull. And I think you're supposed to be like, oh, Florence Pugh's boobs. Okay. Because they make several appearances.
sure.
And they are kind of sleeping together on and off, but they don't want anything serious and blah, blah, blah. And he deserts her for,
Well, she doesn't want anything serious.
he deserts her for Kitty. But then he comes back to her
Yeah.
and he's having multiple affairs. It sounds like.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
There's one point where they're like, you had an affair with this man's wife and he died of a heart attack when he heard the news. And he's like, oh, that's ridiculous. I mean, I did have an affair, but he didn't
He
die
could
of
have
a heart
possibly
attack.
known about our affair.
Yeah, and you're just like, oh, God, you're a dirtbag.
But, and we already talked about this, but for the benefit of the audience, I think that the Florence Pugh character, Jean, is a real thing that happens, but also a pretty common trope in movies about people who are geniuses or people who are fully in control and self-confident. It's, Oppenheimer is somebody who has every aspect of his professional life figured out. And you would think that as an intelligent man, he probably is pretty confident that he has women figured out, at least to whatever extent, one can. And he meets this woman who in her own right, is, let's see, what was she? A psychiatrist, I think. Yeah, she was a psychiatrist. She doesn't fit into the box that he's created for women. She doesn't do the things. She doesn't want flowers. She refuses. It becomes to the point that it becomes a thing for them.
Yeah.
That he brings her flowers every time and she throws them away. She's an enigma to him. He's a man who can solve every problem that's come before him. She is the problem he cannot solve. And that intrigues him. And I do think he would have married her. He would have spent his life with her. Probably been just as much of a philanderer and stuff on her, but I don't think she would have cared. Kitty didn't care because she was in it with a goal. She didn't, like, that was unimportant to her so long as he came home to her at the end. I don't think, Florence would have been an open relationship. Jean would have been an open relationship kind of thing. Like, whatever, it's just flesh, whatever. And that, I think, only would have intrigued him more. That she didn't care about the transgression. But yeah, I see her as this sort of trope of a character where, like, you saw Mindhunter, right? The Holden character that's played by the King of England. Pretty sure you watched Mindhunter. You watched the first season of Mindhunter.
Some of it, yeah.
Yes. So the guy who's played by the King of England, Holden.
Oh, yeah.
He dates this psychology student who helps him to unlock a lot of his mysteries. But Holden is in Mindhunter is also a similar character. He's got he's a genius level that's got everything figured out. And he meets this woman that doesn't quite fit. And he is enthralled with the mystery of who this woman is and solving it. Like, in the case of Holden, it's even more explicit because he's literally a detective and he meets this woman who he can't solve. And who has these progressive values that he is not accustomed to, coming from where he came from in small town USA. It's a trope that I think gets thrown about a lot, and I think that it's done well here. I think the things that you see as lacking, I see as, the fact that she wants to, bed him down right away is beyond the social, is outside of the social norm of the time. That she wouldn't want, X amount of dates and meet the parents and, all these sorts of things. The fact that she's intelligent and not solvable, I think, is like catnip to him. And I think that's why he is initially attracted to her and why he keeps coming back to her.
It feels like a 1.0 version of a manic pixie dream girl. Like, she exists to just tantalize him. And for a person whose life ended with a mysterious, maybe suicide, maybe not. Like, it's all sort of tragic. And I was like, I don't care for this. Like,
Sure.
It's true, but I don't know.
But I mean, I think it's also possible for someone's purpose in your life to be to sort of tantalize you and be a mystery to you, and that not be their purpose in life. Their purpose in your life because we're not given any indication that she wasn't genuine. You know, um, and he doesn't submit to her totally. She's much more into the communist movement. He doesn't
Mhm.
really. Oppenheimer, one of the aspects of this movie is that Oppenheimer flirts with the communist movement in the 30s, before kind of, I think, on some level realizing it could be detrimental to his future and sort of distancing himself from it. Like, he's always sort of in the
And
periphery
he's like,
as academia was at the time.
yeah, but he's like, I never officially
Yeah,
joined,
I know. Yeah,
which
never joined.
is so wild to me because nobody. How do you officially join a
You did,
political party
yeah.
now?
Well,
I don't.
Yeah. Like, I don't. Yeah, I mean,
It's not a
you put it on
thing
your
anymore.
registration, right?
But
Like,
that's not. It's not like you pay a fee and have a card and go to
yeah,
meetings. And so the idea of like I was a member of the Communist Party, like what?
yeah.
It's just weird. I don't know if anyone besides communists has official party membership. I don't
Maybe,
know.
I don't
So
know. I bet the American Nazi Party also had official. Like, they had
um,
you had to get
probably
the back cover of the magazine, the American Nazi magazine, and
with your
mail
ID
it
number
in
on
with
it.
your
Oh,
yeah.
oh, geez.
Yeah.
Well, I just find Jean a tragic figure, and
Sure.
given that she was a person with a full life besides this, I just wish that she had more. I realize
sure,
she is
but
one character in this massive biopic,
in a story of
but
Oppenheimer.
yeah. Well, I guess, and I was unclear on what her role in his life was supposed to be, besides just this chick that he had a lot of sex with, but he couldn't nail her down.
I think
at the end.
I think that's. I mean, if you're saying like this is how he remembers her, this is what he remembers. She's the mystery he couldn't solve. She is the thing that could not be. Like again, I think he would have married her in a second. And the reason that he ends up with Kitty is because Jean is too standoffish about relationships, essentially. Like,
and Jean wasn't calculating enough to get pregnant.
Well, well, sure, but also Kitty is a will make an acceptable wife on his arm at the meetings and everything, even though she herself was in the Communist Party.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that was sort of a thing you did if you were an academic in the 30s and 40s, probably, as you just and then at a certain point you were like, oh right, well these guys are the enemy now, so I've got to disavow that.
I need to be a good capitalist and buy things. And,
yes.
Yeah. Well, so anyway, I just feel sad for all the women in this movie.
And I can appreciate that. But it's sort of like, I think this is supposed to be Oppenheimer's story. It's not supposed to be a story about the life of Oppenheimer, and I can see why it skews the way it does.
I can too, but yeah, if you're going to carve out bits of I don't know. Anyway, if you're going to carve out bits of a life, I feel like you should be still respectful of the other people who are in it. I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know. But then I don't have the same feeling about Strauss. Like, I'm sure he did good things in his life that were not shitty, as shown here, and I'm not upset about his person being
or some of the quote unquote bad guys, like was it Jason Clarke plays the de facto prosecutor in the segments for the re-upping of his top secret clearance. That according to Wikipedia, that guy went on to become like a district court judge.
Yeah,
like all of these people have little snippets of what they continue to do. Like some of them were perhaps rewarded beyond what you would think that they should have gotten, but they all had a life beyond Oppenheimer.
Oh, speaking a life behind Oppenheimer, I forget exactly now what it was at the end, but the whole movie, these two aides have been preparing Strauss for his testimony in the vote and various things, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you're gonna be confirmed, no problem." Blah 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 blah.
And during the course of this, one of them is slowly turning against him as he learns more and more about the actual particulars of what happened.
Yes, the other one, by the way, was Scott Grimes, who was Malarkey in Band of Brothers, and then he was on ER as the Scoofy Doctor. It took me a while to recognize him, and finally I was like,
I recognize him as Malarkey immediately.
But
Malarkey means bullshit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So after a while, the revelations about various things come out. Rami Malek as Enrico Fermi's assistant, I think, comes with various things, and the tide turns, and Strauss is not going to get confirmed. And the other guy, but Alden Ehrenreich, I think is his name, comes in and is, and it was something like, oh, the final vote is this junior senator from Massachusetts. And I was like, I was
What's
waiting.
his
I was
name?
like, this kid, Kennedy trying to make a name for himself.
Trying to make a name for himself.
Like I was waiting to see who these two aides were. Were they someone who were going to turn into somebody? And it was the Kennedy thing.
Oh,
instead,
it's, yeah.
I always enjoy things like that. Again, it's like realizing that that two people existed in the same, like their timelines overlapped. And in a way, it's kind of a cheap shot, or not cheap shot, but like a cheap tactic to be like, oh, that Kennedy, he'll never amount to anything.
Yeah, it's one of those things.
It's funny too.
It's like, if my name's not, Samuel Alito or whatever, like, pick a guy who's now in politics, like,
like in Back to the Future, everyone everywhere is going to say Clint Eastwood is the yellow belly son of a bitch. Like, are they? Okay,
but that's Oppenheimer. There's probably more we could say, but we're out of time.
As unsurprisingly, a 3-hour movie gives you a lot to talk about.
Yeah, and I mean, I think watch it. It's definitely worth watching. I think it's. I didn't get to talk a lot about the cinematography, but I think it might be Christopher Nolan's sort of magnum opus. I might still argue for Interstellar being his best movie. But yeah, it might be, if his career ended now, I think that would be a sort of thing of like, this would be a crown jewel.
Yeah.
For sure on that. So it's definitely worth watching. It's an incredibly well-made movie, by a filmmaker who is incredibly purposeful in everything that he does visually in a movie. So I immediately want to watch it again. So I will at some point do that.
And even though it's 3 hours, it doesn't drag. Like,
no, it doesn't drag. It feels long, but it doesn't drag.
Yeah,
it never drags.
You're not checking your watch and going, really?
Oh, because there's a version of this movie that just ends with the atomic test, and that would probably drag. Because the atomic test happens like 3/4 into the movie or something.
Yeah. So, well, folks, we would love to know what you think about Oppenheimer. Have you been following the career of Josh Hartnett, and how was this casting for you? Or do you see, the 40 Days and 40 Nights kid? Let us know. You can reach us in a couple different ways. You can send us an email. Our handle is YSMYpodcast, YSMY for you, show me yours, at gmail.com. Or you can use the same handle to find us on Facebook and DM us. Also on Facebook, our page has links to all of our latest episodes. Next month, we'll be back to our regular schedule of episodes every other Wednesday. So 2 weeks from today, no matter when you're listening, there'll be a new episode in the queue. Next month, we are back to Before the First Date movies and TV. And we're going to try TV again. I'm going to show Dave All Creatures Great and Small, the 70s one, not the current one that's on PBS, but the old-fashioned one that I grew up on. And we called it The Dog in the Car Show. Can you guess why? Because there's footage of a dog riding in a car.
And I get to tell a story about how good of a boyfriend I was. In the early days of our relationship.
We will we can tell that then. Okay, well, tune in next week for that story with All Creatures Great and Small. In the meantime, this has been You Show Me Yours. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye. The You Show Me Yours theme song is Uplifting Electronic Indie by Winnie the Moog from filmmusic.io. How about we can tag team it?
We are, every time we tag team, it's just...
No, I'm saying like the actual intro.
How would that be different than what we usually do?
When I point to you, you take over the intro.
Oh, that'll go well.
Yes. Let's try it. Ready?
Oh, great. Okay.